Grounded, disaster teams turned back, supplies impounded as the United Nations appealed for almost £100 million in emergency aid for Burma. The UN chief said he'd been unable to speak to the country's ruling generals. A US military aircraft filled with supplies has been approved to land on Monday, although there'll be no visas for an American relief team. And the World Food Programme is resuming flights to Burma tomorrow. The Burmese authorities insist they want to distribute aid themselves, but so far barely a trickle has reached those in desperate need. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Miller reports from Bangkok on the urgent efforts to get Rangoon to open its doors. His report does contain highly distressing images.
As the United Nations and international aid agencies in Thailand warned in increasingly shrill rhetoric that they're locked in a desperate race against time, Burma's ruling junta stated boldly that they didn't want foreign aid workers in their country, just the aid, and not just from friendly nations, they've said. And as more grim images emerged from the devastated Delta region, Britain's ambassador to Rangoon said ominously that the numbers dead and missing could, in his words, escalate very dramatically, beyond the 100,000 authoritative sources are now citing. Bereaved survivors have been left with nothing. This old lady has been laid in a bamboo shelter as her strength declines. The most vulnerable are the old, the injured and the very young. Today, Save the Children said 1.9 million homeless people urgently needed help. This 73-year-old lady, Oh Myin, says, "How am I? I'm destitute and I'm living in this wrecked place." Channel 4 News has heard reports of mass migration of those fit enough to walk from villages which have been abandoned. Often when they reach larger centres like Bugale, there's nothing there for them, no food, no shelter. Even as the UN announced a $155 million emergency appeal for international food aid, its World Food Programme suspended its severely restricted relief operation after the government apparently impounded 2 deliveries at the airport, seemingly determined to distribute the aid itself.
We had at least 3 planes we were hoping to get in tomorrow, one with high-energy biscuits, one with ready-to-eat foods, and 1, if not 2, with operational support equipment. And we're going to have to, in fact, we already have put a hold on those planes because we're not going to send more in until we have this issue resolved.
WFP HQ in Rome told us tonight they're sending 2 planes in tomorrow anyway while negotiations continue. Meanwhile, the UN says the 7 Burmese army helicopters currently used to distribute aid are hopelessly inadequate. The offer of many more has been rebuffed. The UN Secretary-General sought to speak with General Than Shwe, the head of the junta, but the regime has continued to show contempt. Last night, 2 members of a UN emergency response team were deported on arrival at Rangoon airport. 60 Bangladeshi doctors were also turned away when they flew in from Qatar.
I'm concerned that if we lose time at this very critical timing, then not only many more people will die out of this because of this crisis, but I'm also concerned that the disease may spread.
In Bangkok, demonstrators at the Burmese embassy protested against the actions of Burma's absurdly named State Peace and Development Council.
The SPDC will not open the borders and allow for aid workers, relief workers to go inside the country.
Tonight, the main evening news bulletin on Burmese state TV did lead with cyclone news. But the first images depicted a caring regime, munificent in its dealing with survivors. It was a recurring theme. The central message? This is junta aid. The generals in complete control of the relief operation. The newscaster read a list of army family donors and Burmese companies who'd given a total of 40 billion chat. Believe it or not, that's more than £20 million. This took her 8 minutes and 13 seconds. On Miyawari, another army-controlled TV station, no mention at all of the biggest natural disaster in Burmese modern history. cascades of coloured balloons and dancing women, reminding viewers of tomorrow's referendum on the new national constitution. The reason this takes precedence above all else is that it's taken 15 years to draft. It cements the junta's iron grip on power. The date of the vote cannot be moved. It was the auspicious date ordained by the junta's top astrologers. Myanmar TV tonight treated its viewers to a Burmese cheeky girls rendition of a catchy junta single. There were no pictures of dead bodies on Burmese television.
There are isolationists to the extent of being, I think, paranoid. There's no other words, I think, but totally abnormal, you know, and unfit to administer a country.
Although the intention of the international community is indeed humanitarian, it's becoming harder and harder as the days go by to divorce all this from politics. For as the generals prepare for the referendum, the world is looking on aghast, and there's growing international clamour for unilateral intervention to get the aid to those who need it fast, whether or not the regime gives that green light. By coincidence, there's a big joint military exercise going on out here called Cobra Gold, involving US and Southeast Asian forces. This means America's got 4 ships, planes, helicopters, and 11,000 military personnel that can be scrambled quickly. It's the flatlands of the Irrawaddy Delta where the humanitarian crisis is most acute. Huge swathes still underwater. Emergency aid could rapidly be airlifted in there from around the region, though. The challenge, without the green light from the government, is how to get it there. With all its military assets in the region, including those ships and helicopters, the United States is best placed to set up an air bridge, as they did in Aceh after the tsunami. But they'd need their ships nearby and what they call lily pad landing spots onshore, and the Burmese won't allow that. The US ships are being repositioned now, but won't be in the northern Andaman Sea until Tuesday at the earliest. Aid could be dropped from cargo aircraft, but without aid workers on the ground, it's not a favoured option. The bodies of the dead are contaminating the waters of the Irrawaddy. Tonight, we've learned that the US has appealed to China to use its influence on the generals. There are growing fears that there will be many, many more dead, unless they soon relent.
Jonathan Miller reporting from Thailand. Well, earlier today, Gordon Brown gave this response to the situation in Burma.
There are people suffering in Burma. There are children going without food. There are people without shelter. It is utterly unacceptable that when international aid is offered, the regime will try to prevent that getting in. And I'm determined to work with the rest of the international community to make sure that people in need of help, people who face a long and terrible time ahead because of the loss of their homes and because there is famine, get all the help they need.